So I'm going to explore in this video the Heaney poem, The Harvest Bow. A couple of things before I get going. Don't forget, if you find these videos useful, I'd love you to give me some feedback on them. Sometimes I post videos, they're watched a lot, and I don't know whether they're being useful. So if you do find these videos useful, give them one of those, please, on YouTube. I don't want you to think that you have to know everything about this poem. It's quite a complicated poem. Just try and look at the key images and the overall thematic concerns and link it to the other poems that you've been studying. It's important that you get the idea that you're not kind of studying an individual poem, you're studying the poet's work. And that's what you're going to be expected to comment on. The question that you're answering in your leaving cert on whatever poet comes up is going to require you to demonstrate a knowledge of a body of the poet's work, 4 to 6 poems, but not to summarize them. So don't put yourself under pressure to learn what every line means. I won't even try to explain what every line means in this poem. So we get going now, and remember, if you're in my classes, in whatever iteration, day school, grind classes, Brunner, you have the notes. So super. If you're not in my classes, PMC Brunner at iCloud, and you can email me and I can organise for you to receive notes. So The Harvest Bow is a poem which is very similar to another poem by Heaney called Mossbawn Sunlight. It is a poem about love. It's a love poem, not a traditional romantic love poem. That's the underground. But it's a poem about love. It's a poem about his father and his love for his father. It's a poem about loss, and the same way Mossbawn Sunlight is about his love for his Aunt Mary and his recognition on reflection that she played a huge, important role in his life. In the same way as he writes this poem, his father has passed away. And it's a poem about appreciation. It's a poem about how Heaney looks at his father and his relationship with his father and thinks, Christ, wasn't I lucky to have him in my life? Now, that gives it a universal appeal, because we all have people in our lives that maybe make a positive contribution, and maybe we take a little for granted. Heaney's poetry is always reflective. He writes in a narrative style. Reflective means thoughtful. He writes in a narrative style, and this is one of his poems. Sorry, now I'm trying to plug something in here. This is one of his poems in which he addresses his very personal themes. Don't forget, in Heaney's poetry, you'll have poems which address deeply personal themes, but then you'll have poems which are kind of more concerned with the society he inhabits and the world around him. So that's things like A Constable Calls or The Tolland Man. This is one of those poems that goes with like a call, or as I said, Mossbawn Sunlight, or even Postscript, The Underground, any of those. Okay, so let's get going. It opens with this beautiful kind of memory of his father working on one of these. That's a harvest bow. It's a piece of corn, it's a piece of cereal, and at harvest time, there was a tradition, because harvest was like the culmination of the year's work in an agrarian agricultural society. You put the seed in the ground, you nurture it, you water it, it grows, and eventually then all the year's hard work comes to fruition, literally, at harvest time, and you can gather in the crops, and it's a celebration. So the harvest bow was worn by people where Heaney's from in County Derry in order to celebrate that time of the year. And his father used to make them, the bows. And so Heaney remembers that. As you plaited the harvest bow, plaited means, created it by twisting the piece of wheat. You implicated the mellowed silence in you in wheat that does not rust, but brightens as it tightens twist by twist into a knowable corona, a throwaway love knot of straw. It's a really interesting example of Heaney's use of imagery. It's kind of complicated. It's surreal. We have this image of wheat that doesn't rust. So, rusting means growing old and being degraded. So It's like the wheat is constantly regenerated because you can grow more of it. So every year there's new wheat. There's this very photographic close-up image of the bow being tightened twist by twist. There's this really unusual line, knowable corona. And then you have the first kind of, now I know do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just change a couple of things here really quickly. Sorry. Because I have those in the, in my classes, the lines that are in blue, I think are important. But the lines that are in yellow are the ones I want you to learn. So I've got the color coding wrong here. So I'm just going to change this as I go along. So a corona, that's a difficult line. A corona is like a burst of light, like a star. But really, the most important line in the opening stanza is this throw away love not. Now look at that, throw away love not. First of all, you get that brilliant example of Heaney's. One of the things you see in all Heaney's poems is compound words. So he takes two words, sticks them together. It's like a little signature of his poetry. But how can something made from straw be a knot? How can something be both throwaway and permanent, tying it to you? And of course, what he's talking about is the difference between the literal bow and its meaning to him. So the bow itself, it's a piece of wheat. It'll last a couple of days before it flitters away and breaks down, and you throw it away then. But when he looks at those bows every year at this time of year, at harvest time, it reminds him of the love he has for his father and the love his father had for him. So for him, it's a symbol of the unbreakable connection that he has with his dad. And that's a fantastic example of metaphor. So the bow is symbolic of his relationship with his father. The bow is a metaphor for the love he has for his father. That opening stanza is not easy. It is somewhat difficult and challenging. You can say that about Heaney's work, but what you want to say is that then he hits you with these very, very simple but sophisticated images that they're easy to understand, but they're carefully crafted. Then he describes his father in great detail, physically. Hands, he describes his hands kind of zoning in on him working on the making the bow. Hands that aged round ash plants and cane sticks and lapped the spurs on a lifetime of gamecocks. I'll come back to that in a second. Hark to your gift and worked with fine intent. Your fingers moved somnambulant. I tell and finger it like braille, cleaning the unsaid off the palpable. And there you have that. That's the most important line in that stanza. This here, he's just describing the reality of his dad's life. His dad was a sensitive man, but he was also a tough man, a man of the world. A gamecock is a male chicken. The spur is the spur on the back of its foot. To lap is to chop off. A way of stopping these gamecocks fighting each other, so aggressive, was to take off the back of their foot so they couldn't, get themselves up into fighting position. So it's an image of brutality. The father, had to be tough. He was a tough man in that world. You had to be tough. The farming there's no room for sensitivity in farming. Then there's this image of somnambulant is like the almost silence of the skill of his father, making the bows. And as then Heaney, this movement between past and present, he's remembering his dad making the bows, but he's sitting in the present tense. Years have gone by. He's holding one of these bows, and as he holds it in his hands, he says it's like braille. And braille, as you know, is a language of touch, tactile language, and a haptic language. And as he holds this bow in his hand, he play on words. To glean is to separate the useful part of a cereal crop from the chaff, the wheat from the chaff, the stalk that you throw away. And what he's saying here is that when he holds that bow, he knows something is true. Palpable means something you can hold in your hands. As he holds that bow, he knows something that was never said, something that was left unsaid, was true. What was the thing? The words, I love you. His father wasn't the man who would, turn around and say, I love you, son. It wasn't in the culture. Read Philadelphia, Here I Come, you get an idea. But Heaney knows that his dad loved him. He knows he did. And he knows because of his memories of this particular thing that his dad did for the family, making the bows for everybody, and pinning them to their clothes at that time of the year. We have this memory again, this kind of anecdote, very much a narrative poem, this, where he says, and if I spy into the golden loops, there's this kind of like cinematic image of him looking at the you can see a camera kind of looking at the loop in the bow, and as you look through the loop, then a new image emerges, and it's back into memory. So the bow is like the Horcruxes or not the Horcrux, I can't remember in Harry Potter, where you touch it and it brings you to a different place. So the bow is like it triggers memories, and he remembers, being with his dad. I see us walk between the railway slopes into an evening of long grass and midges. So it's like that kind of September time in Ireland, harvest time, blue smoke straight up, people still lighting fires and burning turf, old beds. That's talking about when he says beds, he means ploughed fields and ploughs in hedges. An auction notice on an outhouse wall, you with your harvest bow and your lapel, me with the fishing rod. So there's this really, really, really vivid imagery of this memory he has with his dad, and every detail matters because it's a valuable memory. Already homesick for the big lift of those evenings, which are stick whacking the tips off weeds, great use of onomatopoeia there, beats out of time and beats but flushes nothing, that original townland. And then this is a great line, still tongue-tied in the straw tied by your hand. So it's just this kind of surreal change in that stanza, from the vivid cinematic immediacy of the memory of the two of them walking along in this very, very clear setting description, to then this kind of unusual break with the repetition of beats out of time and beats. And it's like he's looking back on that memory, but he still regrets the idea that they were tongue-tied, that they weren't able to say, those words to each other, I love you. The last stanza of the poem contains the best line in the poem, best two lines in the poem. That's one of them, and that's the other one. Your ends are your goals, your aims, your reasons for doing something. Art is, in Heaney's case, poetry. Peace is contentment. When Heaney says the end of art is peace, he's saying he's writing this poem because he's trying to come to terms with this relationship. And when he holds that bow in his hand, he often in his poetry talks about his father's work being like his work. I don't know if you read the poem Digging as a junior cycle student. That his father's work was noble as his work is valuable. And as he holds one of these bows, now it's years later, he's a middle-aged man, his dad has passed away, and as he holds this bow in his hand, and as he writes this poem, he's thinking about the craft it took to make the bow, that was his dad's skill, and the craft it takes to write this poem, that's his skill. And as he holds this poem, as he holds this bow and as he writes this poem, he feels a sense of, contentment when he thinks about his dad. The end of art is peace could be the motto of this frail device. And he's put it up. A dresser is a piece of furniture in the kitchen. Deal is wood, a type of wood. He's put it up, pinned it onto a deal dresser in the kitchen. And he describes it as like a drawn snare. And that's fantastic. It's just fantastic. A snare is a trap. You don't expect it to be there, but if it gets you, it really hurts. And I suppose what he's talking about is this. While the bow and the memories it triggers is the source of warmth, is the source of contentment, is the source of the knowledge of love, it's also a source of pain. And you don't know when you have those memories what's going to come, the warmth or the pain. Why is it a source of pain? Two reasons. First of all, that sense of things left undone with his dad, that they didn't ever, have that conversation about love and about appreciation, that conversation that we often don't have and we only think about having after somebody has died. So that's the second source of pain. that when he looks at the bow, he's reminded of his grief. He's reminded of the absence of that man in his life. He's reminded of the fact that his dad is no longer with him. Seamus Heaney. Like a drawn snare, slipped lately by the spirit of the corn, yet burnished by his passage and still warm. Gorgeous ending, that image of warmth at the end that brings me, again, I said at the beginning, Mossbawn sunlight, this poem was not in common with that image of warmth that he associates with love, that he associates with memory, that he associates with people in his life who showed him love and brought him happiness, his Aunt Mary and his dad. It's a brilliant poem. And it's a little bit complicated. It's about memory. It's about the connection between the past and the present. It's about love. It's about appreciation of things that maybe we take for granted. It's about the art and craft of writing poetry. It's about Seamus Heaney's dad, and it's about all of our relationships with people that we love that maybe can be slightly difficult, but which are immensely valuable to us. Hope you found that in some way useful or insightful.